So, before Googling was a verb and way before social media feeds dictated our mornings, you know what we had? We had Yahoo. Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking the story of literally the original front page of the internet. If you ever logged online using a squealing dial-up modem in the late 90s or early 2000s, Yahoo wasn't just a website. No, it was your front door to the entire digital world. But how does a ubiquitous empire go from practically owning the web to being sold off for parts? Let's dive right into it. $100 billion. At its absolute peak, this tech giant boasted a staggering $100 billion valuation. And to really wrap your head around the gravity of that number, we kind of have to put it into the context of the early 2000s dot-com bubble. $100 billion meant Yahoo was suddenly worth more than legacy American titans like Ford, Chrysler, and General Motors combined. Mind-blowing, right? It wasn't just a successful website. It was a cornerstone of the new global economy, fueled by unprecedented hype and massive traffic. Because, well, it was the single most visited destination on the web. Which brings us to a fascinating business mystery. Honestly, maybe one of the greatest of our time. How on earth did a company that was seemingly impossible to beat, a company with basically infinite resources and complete market dominance, how did it lose its crown? How does an empire worth $100 billion just evaporate into a cautionary tale? Well, the answer is incredibly complex. It's this wild story of hubris, massive technological shifts, and a few critical missteps. And we're going to uncover exactly what went wrong. But to understand the fall, we really have to appreciate their remarkably humble rise. Picture it. It's 1994. Two electrical engineering grad students at Stanford University, Jerry Yang and David Philo, are working out of a campus trailer. They created a simple directory just to keep track of their favorite places on the early, super messy internet. Originally, and kind of hilariously, they called it Jerry and David's Guide to the World Wide Web. Thankfully, they soon renamed it to Yahoo, which, fun fact, actually stands for Yet Another Hierarchically Organized Oracle. By the late 1990s, they rode the massive wave of the dot-com boom and completely transformed that simple directory into the undisputed global gateway to the web. Now, Yahoo didn't just stay a directory. They actively built an incredibly lucrative digital empire, expanding rapidly into search, email, news, finance, entertainment, you name it. The whole strategy here was to create what the tech industry calls a walled garden. Basically, they wanted to be the absolute only site you ever needed to visit. Why? Well, in the early days of display advertising, keeping your eyeballs on their pages for as long as possible was exactly how they made their money. If you checked your stocks, read the sports scores, and emailed your friends without ever leaving Yahoo, they could serve you a constant stream of banner ads, literally printing money in the process. But then, the underlying architecture of the internet began to shift, and that sparked the search wars. The tension really came down to two vastly different technological philosophies. On one side, you had Yahoo's approach, which was this broad, increasingly cluttered directory that relied heavily on actual humans to categorize the web. On the other side, a young startup called Google, bringing a highly streamlined, technologically superior algorithmic approach. Google used scalable web crawlers and its PageRank algorithm to index the internet automatically. Think about it. Yahoo's business model relied on keeping you trapped on their homepage all day, whereas Google's revolutionary model was designed to send you exactly where you needed to go, away from their site, as fast as humanly possible. So as the internet grew way too vast for human curation, Yahoo's directory model started to crack. But their solution wasn't to build better search tech in-house. Instead, they adopted a strategy of just trying to buy innovation. And this brings us to what are now legendary in Silicon Valley as the billion-dollar misses. These represent some of the most famous strategic turning points in modern business history. We are talking about moments where the literal future of the internet was sitting right across the negotiating table, and Yahoo let it slip right through their fingers. Get this. In 1998, Yahoo had the opportunity to essentially acquire the underlying technology of a young Google. The asking price? A mere $1 million. Yahoo passed. They preferred users to browse their directory rather than search and leave. Then, years later, as social media started to take off, Yahoo attempted to buy a nascent Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg's asking price was $1 billion. Yahoo's leadership balked and famously tried to lower the offer to $850 million. That caused Zuckerberg to walk away from the table entirely. By refusing to meet those prices, Yahoo missed the chance to own both the next generation of search and the future of social networking. It is vital to understand, though, that Yahoo's decline wasn't caused by just one single missed acquisition. It was really a systemic breakdown. The company suffered from constantly changing internal business priorities. They were endlessly debating whether they were a media company or a tech company. And this was severely exacerbated by leadership instability. Over the years, they cycled through a dizzying array of CEOs, from Terry Semel to Jerry Yang, Carol Bartz, and Scott Thompson. Each of them brought a completely different vision, which obviously confused employees and investors alike. You combine all of that with a glaring lack of focus on true search innovation and a string of other failed acquisitions that didn't really move the needle, and you've got a giant struggling to define a long-term strategy while its rivals executed flawlessly. Realizing this existential threat, Yahoo attempted a massive, highly publicized reboot. Enter the Marissa Mayer era in 2012. Mayer, who was a former top executive at Google, was brought in to revive Yahoo's stagnant culture and completely overhaul its products. Honestly, it was a valiant late-stage turnaround attempt. She tried everything, acquiring the blogging platform Tumblr for over $1 billion, pivoting heavily into mobile, and hiring high-profile media personalities. But by this point, the competitive moats built by giants like Google and Facebook were already monumental. The current was simply way too strong to swim against, and the core business just continued to bleed revenue. Perhaps the absolute most fatal structural flaw in Yahoo's later years was falling victim to the classic innovator's dilemma. While the rest of the world was shifting heavily to smartphones, Yahoo remained fundamentally stuck in a desktop mindset. Their legacy desktop display ads were still bringing in a lot of cash, you see, and pivoting aggressively to mobile meant risking that core revenue stream. So as mobile smartphone usage absolutely exploded globally, Yahoo's desktop relevance remained entirely stagnant. They failed to decisively pivot when the whole world suddenly decided to put the internet in their pockets. Which brings us to the devastating climax of the story in 2017, when Verizon officially acquired Yahoo's core internet business. Now remember that staggering $100 billion valuation from the peak of the dot-com bubble we talked about earlier? Well, Verizon purchased Yahoo for just under $4.5 billion. It was an absolutely stunning destruction of value, and it officially ended Yahoo's incredible run as an independent tech giant. Now sure, while some specific Yahoo services, like Yahoo Finance and Yahoo Mail, do still maintain dedicated user bases today, the era of Yahoo as the undisputed king of the web was definitively over. So what does this all mean? The crucial takeaway from Yahoo's story isn't that the internet stopped growing, or that people stopped reading the news or checking their email. No, Yahoo disappeared from its throne because the internet changed faster than Yahoo was willing or even able to change with it. When a company becomes way too attached to the business model that made them successful yesterday, they completely blind themselves to the technological shifts happening tomorrow. It's a stark, multi-billion-dollar reminder that past success does not guarantee future survival in the tech world. As the research points out, becoming number one is incredibly difficult, but staying number one is even harder. In technology, today's giant can become tomorrow's forgotten name if it stops innovating. Why does this matter to you? Well, because whether you're building a startup, studying financial markets, or just observing the digital ecosystem we all live in, relentless adaptation is everything. The landscape never stops shifting. So what current, seemingly unstoppable tech giant do you think might be the next to ignore this lesson? Think about that for a second, and I will catch you in our next explainer.